Okay, folks, good evening. Okay, tonight is the section of the Torah reading. The Torah reading for this coming Shabbat is called Bechukotai. In my statutes is the literal translation. And one of the most challenging issues in this particular reading, as it's called a parsha, is the whole section on the curses which occur in the third reading, in the third aliyah, for the third person who's called up to the Torah, to the extent that the person who's they don't even call anyone up. Usually, as everybody knows, they call up 7 people to the Torah. Usually 7 people to the and then the half Torah, but 7 people, and it's an honor to be called up and to make the blessings and so on and so forth. But because of this particular this week's parasha, so this week's reading, so the custom is that the person who's doing the reading, the Bal Koira, is the only one he's sort of called up instead, and they don't even say his name. He just goes up at his aliyah. They don't want to call a person because these are sort of very scary curses and so on and so forth. And is this aspect of the curses that I want to examine tonight. In the webinar, Mrs. Zukernik did address it to some extent. By the way, sort of talking about other things, but I would like to address it a little bit more in depth tonight. So, one of the things that we always focus on when we're talking about the klalot, the curses, the apparent curses, is to understand that it can't be what it seems to be. They can't be what they seem to be. These curses are terrible curses. Without going into them, anyone can see them in the section Bechukotai, Pasha, the third Aliyah. I don't want to go into them now, but let me tell you a story from the Talmud. This is a story about Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, the famous Rashbi, the author of the Zohar, the famous mystic, and so on and so forth. The person who had tremendous, you could say even have the spirit of prophecy, for sure, divinely inspired. And there was an occasion when 2 sages came to visit him. And they spent some time there. They spent the night there, and they went to say goodbye to him and so on and so forth. And after they left, he said to his son, Rabbi Shimon said to his son, "These are great men. You should go and get a blessing from them." So Rabbi Shimon's son went, and he went to get a blessing. This is the story is told in the tractate called Moed Katan, page 9b. So, what happened was he went into Rabbi Shimon's son went into these sages, and what happened was they gave him. They kind of gave him a blessing. But they gave him a blessing in a very, very strange way. The blessing seemed to be very unusual, very. It was hard for him to understand how this was in fact a blessing, let's put it that way. It seemed that it was a curse. These 2 sages, their names were Rabbi Yonatan and Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yonatan and Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yonatan ben Asmai and Rabbi Yehuda ben Geirim. So anyway, the young son of Rabbi Shimon goes out, he follows them, and eventually they realize that he's standing there and said, "Yeah, what is it that you want?" So he said, "My father said to me, come and get a blessing from you." So this is the blessing, this is the blessing they gave him, and you have to understand, we'll explain it afterwards in a different way. They said to him as follows: "May it be the will of God that you sow, but you don't reap. That you take in, and you don't bring out. Sow and not reap is talking about the crops, obviously. That you take in and not bring out means that you buy merchandise, but no one wants to, you can't sell it, no one wants to buy it from you. That's what he understood. You bring out, and then you don't take in. This is another sentence. He understood that would mean to also business dealings, that he would spend money for the merchandise and not receive the merchandise, and actually not receive. He would bring out, take money out of his pocket and not take it in, and not actually get the merchandise. They continue, let your house be destroyed and let your inn be inhabited. Let your table be disturbed, and may you not see a new year. So he parted from them, Rabbi Shimon's son, and he went back to his father, and he was very disturbed. And he said to his father, it's not enough that they didn't give me a blessing. They actually caused me pain. He didn't say they gave me a curse. They cursed me because he understood that these were very holy men, and they obviously weren't cursing him. And it's indeed questionable why it comes down in a way of a curse, why they said it in a way that seemed to be a curse rather than directly a blessing. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. So he said, it's not enough that they blessed me, they caused me anguish, they caused me pain. So Rabbi Shimon asked his son, so what did they say to you? And he repeated what they had said word for word. So he said, these are expressions of tremendous blessing, and I'm going to explain it to you. He said, when they said, may it be God's will that you sow and not reap, they meant, may you have children who will not pass away in your time. When they said that you take in and not bring out, what they meant is you will take in, it's got nothing to do with produce or business transactions, that you will take in daughters-in-law, in other words, that your sons will marry fine young ladies, and the sons won't die so that your daughters-in-law, their wives, will not go away, because it's always, it was kind of traditional or customary that if a husband died and the woman had no one to support her, so she would go home to her father's house and she would bring up her children there until she remarried or whatever. So again, this blessing explained, may it be that your daughters-in-law will come into your sons' houses and they will never have to leave to go back to their fathers because the husbands will stay alive. And then they said, he continued, when they said bring out and not take in, what they meant was that your daughters will, you will have daughters who will themselves marry, and their husbands won't die and cause them to return to you. You will take them out, you'll take them to the down the aisle, so to speak, and they'll go and live in their husbands' houses, and they'll never come back. They'll never come back to you to be permanent residents in your houses because they're in your house because their husbands will be alive. And then they said, when they said, let your house be destroyed and let your inn be inhabited, what they meant was this world is compared to a temporary inn, like an inn that you just stay in for the night. Whereas the next world is compared to a permanent house. So what they were saying is, may it be that your house lie unoccupied. In other words, your permanent residence, the world to come, be unoccupied for now, and let your inn be inhabited. May you stay in the inn for a very long time. May you stay in the inn for a very long time. And in other words, that your permanent house, which is really your grave, will not be occupied for a very long time. And then when they said, let your table be disturbed, what they meant is that you should have lots of sons and daughters. And when you have kids, things aren't always the way they, there's a mess. The house is often messy when there's lots of kids around. In fact, I remember when I first went to England, I went to England as a shaliach. A shaliach means an emissary. I was in England for a few years where I was teaching. So I went. We spent Passover with Pesach with a family. Rabbi Shmuel Lu, very very interesting person. Him and his wife. But he had at that time he had 14 children, and I think in the end they had altogether 17 kids. So first thing he said to me was, he says, all of you, I'm sure, have heard that on Passover you clean out everything and everything is spotless and so on and so forth, and you make sure that it's it's a spring festival and so on and so forth, and you get rid of all the chametz, all the leaven, all the bread, all the crumbs, and everything's spotless and clean and perfect. And he said, I just want to warn you that we came to the conclusion that you either have children or you have special constrictions on Passover. You can't have both. In other words, if you have children, don't expect it to be perfect. So that was kind of the same thing over here, that, you should have a messy table means you should have lots of children, sons and daughters, and, they make a mess, because that's what kids do. And when they said to him, may you not see a new year, what they meant was, may your wife live a long life and not pass away young, and therefore you'll not have to marry another wife, because when the Jewish law stipulates that in the year that a husband marries a wife, for the first year, he's not allowed to go out to war. There's certain, he's sort of, that first year is set aside for dedication to his wife. And that's what they meant. May you not see a new year, meaning a new year with a new wife. And so of course the son of Rabbi Shimon was extremely happy, because they had really given him some very great blessings. Now again, we can ask the question, why blessings sometimes have to come down in a way of in a disguised kind of a way. So there's several answers to this, and one of the answers is that in order that the forces of evil, as it's called sometimes the evil eye, won't get involved. The forces of evil and jealousy and hatred and so on and so forth won't get involved in what appear to be curses, because it would look like the curses are doing the work of evil for them, right? For the forces of evil. Okay, that's one explanation. That's why they're given in that particular way. Another interesting explanation is that these two sages wanted Rabbi Shimon's son to hear them as curses, which he did, and that his father would explain them as blessings. Why? Because there was an additional lesson. Not only would they get the blessings themselves, but they would get the method of, he would be able to learn the method of interpreting things in a positive light. Things which are apparently negative in a positive light. There's a sort of a story which is also told about a man who had some business dealings in a faraway place. He was far away from home, and his wife sent him a telegram and that she needs money urgently, and he had money with him, and he had gone on this business deal because things were not so good at home, so he was far away. But he wanted to send her the money. He had the money to give her now. He'd done some good business deals, and he wanted to send her the money. But of course, in those days, there were no banks and so on and so forth, or no, the banks weren't trustworthy, and he couldn't send it in that way. So he wanted to send it with an emissary. So he found a fellow that was going nearby near to his town, and he said to him, look, I've got the sum of money that I want to send back to my wife. Would you please take it to her for me? So the fellow was reluctant, that he had to go a little bit out of his way to go to the town where this fellow was. He was nearby, but wasn't exactly there, and so on and so forth. And he was hesitating, didn't really want to do it. It was a hassle, he didn't want to do it. So this fellow, who was a very smart, very intelligent chap, said to him, look, it'll be worth your while. I'll pay you to do it. Okay, how much are you going to pay me? I'll pay you whatever you want. Whatever you want of this, he gave him $10,000, equivalent, whatever, rubles. 10,000 rubles. Take whatever you want and give it to my and give my wife the rest. Right? Take whatever you want and give my wife. I'm sorry. Yeah, let me say that again. He said it like this: whatever you want, you can give my wife and take the rest. Right? Whatever you want, you can give my wife and take the rest. That's how he said it. Anyway, the fellow is kind of, so he's suspicious that this sounds like too good of a deal. He wants it in writing. So they made it in writing, signed by 2 witnesses and so on and so forth. And he goes back and he goes to this woman's town, and he says, "Listen, your husband gave me a sum of money to give you, and he has $100. So she said, $100? He told me he was sending $10,000. What happened here? So I said, no, he said to give you whatever I want, and I can keep the rest. So she was kind of shocked, and how could a husband do such a thing? And he even brought out a contract and showed her, look, it's signed, this is your husband's signature, 2 witnesses, this is legal. So she said, no, it can't be that my husband did that. We have to go to the rabbi, and we have to get a ruling on this matter. So eventually he agreed to go to the rabbi. Of course, the rabbi was a very wise, very wise fellow. And he said to him like this, he said, I understand what he intended. He said, what you want, give to her what you want. What you want, in other words, you want $9,990, that's what you have to give to $9,900, that's what you have to give to her. And the $100 you keep for yourself. See, that's what... So in other words, it's the same. In the same words, you can interpret them in a completely different way. You can understand them. You can understand them differently. What you want, give to her, and you'll get the rest, which is only $100. Okay. Similarly, when it comes to certain events that happen in our lives, there's different ways of looking at those events. Now, there's 3. They're essentially the Kabbalah and Hasidic teachings talk about 3 different ways in which one can approach negative events which are apparently a disaster in our lives. The first way is to accept whatever it is, accept it willingly and accept it with joy. Not just willingly, but with joy. The Kabbalists explain that when you accept something with joy, even if it's very, very sharp and very bitter and very, very harsh, by accepting it with joy, you start to sweeten the severities. You start to sweeten the severities. In other words, it won't be as bad as it looks now, because since you accepted it with joy, you've started to change it a little bit already. You started to change the harshness, the severity, and you sweetened it with your joy. Now, the origin of joy in Kabbalah and Hasidic teachings, it says, there's a verse that says, Eim habonim smecha, the mother of children is joyful. The mother is Bina. Always in Kabbalah, the sort of the family of the Sfirot, if we correspond the Sfirot to the family, or rather the Partzufim are a Sfira or a cluster of Sfirot, if we align them to family members to be able to understand how they operate, so Chochmah is called Abba the father, and Bina is called Ima, the mother, and then there's the son and there's the daughter. The son is the 6 emotional Sfirot, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, starting with love all the way to foundation or connection. And then the daughter is Malchut. Yeah, the daughter is Malchut, the final of the 10 Sfirot. So, where does Simcha come from? Where does joy come from? It comes from Bina. Em habanim smecha. The mother of children rejoices. She's happy. In other words, Bina, which is really understanding, allows us, because we understand that whatever it is that lands in our lap is in one way or another to our benefit, even though we don't necessarily see it that way, automatically it starts to, when we accept it in that kind of way, we start to lace it with joy. We start to lace it with, if it comes out of understanding that it must be good, then the joy is a product of that understanding. Joy is a product of our understanding. Aim habanim smecha. The mother of children is joyful. The mother of what comes out of her will be joyful because she understands things in the right context, even if she doesn't understand exactly why this particular thing happened, but accepts that it must be for the good. Therefore, the end result is that it will turn out, eventually, it will turn out to be a joyful thing, even if right now it doesn't feel that way. And there's many, many stories that illustrate this. I've told some of them before. I don't know if I should go into it now, but in any event, that's one approach. That's one approach, to accept things with joy. Another approach, and these are both valid approaches, all three approaches I'll mention are valid, it's just that they have different results. The second approach is called pashpesh b'ma'asav, to examine your deeds. In other words, in some way or another, to, exactly, happy is he who is satisfied with his lot. That's right, in Birkei Avot, exactly. So the second way is to examine your deeds, lepashpesh b'ma'asav. If bad things are happening to me, it must mean that I need some self-improvement somewhere or another. Right? These things are happening to me in order to improve me, in order to better me, in order to bring me to a better place. So let me examine what it is that's causing that's causing the problem in my own behavior, and rectify that, and then everything will be okay. Sort of what might be called a tikkunology, right? We do a tikkun we rectify what it is that needs to be rectified in our own behavior, in our own actions, our own ways of thinking, our own ways of relating, and whatever it may happen to be. But you have to examine your deeds and think deeply into what it is that is causing the problem. However, both of these approaches have two downsides to them. One downside is that we are nevertheless approaching the suffering as suffering. We're approaching the negative event as a negative event, as a reality that's either here for me to sweeten it by seeing by accepting it with joy, or by examining my deeds and improving myself. But ultimately, the event itself is still regarded really as a negative event. And the end result might not come immediately. The end result might come after a very long time. I may only be able to see after a very long time that it was a good result. I was in Israel, and a friend of mine told me this amazing story where a friend of his was on a bus. He got on a bus in I think in Jerusalem, if I'm not mistaken. He got on a bus in Jerusalem, and this bus was someone got onto the bus and blew it up. And he was one of the people that all that happened to him was the ringing ears. That's all. He wasn't hurt. He wasn't wounded. He was. So he made after the ringing in his ears disappeared. He made what's called a Sudat Ho'ada'ah, a Thanksgiving feast, a feast of Thanksgiving, and invited friends and so on and so forth. And he told a story at this feast. And the story he told was as follows. Once, he used to live in New York. So he said once his car broke down in New York and they had to get to work, so he took a bus. Not being familiar with the buses because he always drove to work. So not being familiar with the buses, he went and he looked around. He saw there was a seat at the back. So he went to the back of the bus and he sat down. Now, if anyone's ever been on a bus in New York, you'll probably know that the back seat of the bus is not, or the back seats of the bus are not the place to sit. You sit as close to the driver as you can find a seat. In any event, he went to sit in the back of the bus, and someone came and sat down next to him. He took a knife out of his pocket, this fellow that sat down next to him, and he put it between, put the point between his ribs, and he said to him, "Your money or your life." He basically held him up. So what is he going to do? He gave him his wallet, and that was it. He didn't have a choice. And he cursed the day that he sat in the back of the bus to such an extent that he said to himself, "I will never, ever sit in the back of the bus again. Ever." Anyway, fast forward, he's now moved to Israel, he's living in Jerusalem, he gets on the bus. He sees that there is, the bus, he was on his way home, and the bus was full. It was rush hour, the bus was full. And he sees that the only seat available is right at the back of the bus. He starts moving there, and he thinks to himself, you know what, I made a vow to myself, I'm never going to sit in the back of the bus, and I didn't annul that vow. In Jewish law, if you make a vow, you have to keep the vow unless you annul it, and there's a whole procedure for annulling it, and I didn't annul the vow. I'm not going to sit in the back of the bus, that's all. And he moved back to the front of the bus. It was the next stop that a terrorist got on the back of the bus, because there's two doors on the bus, the front door and the back door. They sometimes get in the back, and then, so just send them the money up or come up and give them money, whatever. Anyway, the guy got in the back of the bus. He detonated his explosive vest, and anyone around, including the people who was the person that was sitting in that seat where he would have been sitting, other people were killed. That person was killed, and many more were very badly hurt, and so on and so forth. In any event, his life was saved. So he said, if I would go back to my bus experience in New York, if I had known that what happened to me then would save my life now, I would give the guy a kiss. You see? So there's things that happen that, it's only revealed many, many years later, or much later, why something was not as bad as it perhaps could have looked. There's a third explanation. A third explanation of what we do when we approach, when we find ourselves in an adverse situation, in adversity, or when we're suffering from from something or another. The third approach says that all Yisurim, all suffering, is really only a test. It's a test. And if I pass the test, then the suffering goes away. It goes away. If I pass the test, the suffering goes away. Now, I would like to suggest that what Rabbi Shimon was teaching his son is that if you dig deep enough into any what might appear to be a tragic circumstance, a negative event, if you dig deep enough, you will find deep within it, you will find that it was really only there. It's a mirage. It's not even there. It's not even really there. It's only there to test you. That's the only purpose of it. And once you realize that, it's not a test anymore. It's you've eliminated the test. You've succeeded. You've overcome. Now, the word for test in Hebrew is nisayon. Nisayon. And the word for a certain type of flag, a pennant, actually, is also called a nace. A nace from the word nisayon, same root as the word nisayon. So really the idea is that a nisayon, a test, is there to raise you up like a flag, to raise you to the top of the pole, to raise you like a pennant, so that you lift yourself up above where you are. You're no longer in the same rut that you were before, but you've lifted yourself out of it. You've lifted yourself out of it. There was a Hasidic Rebbe named the Rebbe Maharash, one of the Lubavitcher Rebbes, the fourth Lubavitch Rebbe, who, Grand Rabbi, who famously said that the goal is not to skirt problems or to bury yourself until they pass, just duck until they pass, but to jump over them. And he expressed it like this, L'chatchila ariber. He said, you don't go around, you don't go under. You go from the outset, you go over the top. You go over the top. And that really is what we're talking about here. If one can lift oneself out of the situation by redefining the situation or by reinterpreting it, understanding it in a positive light, looking for a way in which this event could be interpreted as a positive thing, then it'll in fact be a positive thing. I know a fellow who was kind of unfortunate, but various things happened. I'm not going to go into the details of exactly what happened, but unfortunately, this fellow found himself in jail. If someone else committed a crime, but it was connected to him because I don't know, whatever it was. He wasn't really involved. He wasn't involved in the crime, but he somehow got connected to it. He was carrying stuff. He was doing somebody a favor and taking something for them and whatever, and he got busted and he didn't even know about it. It was just a package that he was taking, whatever. So let's not get into the details, but he got busted and he was convicted. And he was sent to prison for a couple of years. So a friend of his who hadn't seen him around for a long time, an acquaintance, let's put it that way, who hadn't seen him, he didn't know that he was in jail. When he got out of jail, he said, the friend saw him, oh, I haven't seen you around for such a long time. Where have you been? So I said, oh, I was in yeshiva. Now, yeshiva is the term that's used for a study hall when in the Talmudic university, so to speak, is called the yeshiva. It's a place where you sit and you study and where you gain knowledge and you learn deeply and so on. It's called yeshiva. But yeshiva is also a nickname for someone who's sitting in prison. It literally means to sit. Because when you're in yeshiva, you sit most of the time. You're sitting down and you're discussing and learning, and usually you learn in a partnership. You don't learn on your own, you learn with a partner, a study buddy. So I said, I was in yeshiva. And the truth is he meant it, because during the time that he was in prison, he said, listen, I'm incarcerated, I have nothing else to do. What, I'm going to bemoan my fate? I'm going to sit here and I'm going to study. I have time now. I don't have anything else to do except, make sure my cell is clean. Whatever else they had to do in the prison, there were certain duties I had to do, but I don't have any other duties, and I'm going to make sure that I'm going to make the best of it. And in fact, he did, and he sat and he studied, and he was exonerated, in fact, for his the crime when they found out what the real story was. He was exonerated, he was let out, and but he had spent a couple of years in yeshiva. He was sitting in such a way that he made the best of it. I would suggest that this is really what Rabbi Shimon was teaching his son, and why these two men, who were very wise men indeed, sent him back to his father with these apparent curses, so that he would learn how to reinterpret things in such a way that they turn out to be blessings rather than curses. Okay. Any questions, folks? Any questions?